Daenerys Targaryen stood upon the scorched outskirts of old Valyria, the ruins echoing with secrets best left undisturbed. Ghostly spires reached toward a sky woven with ragged clouds. The ancient city was half-drowned, half-burned, lost to cataclysmic memory. And yet she, a child of Valyrian blood, had come seeking answers. It was a journey few dared attempt, for the doom still cloaked this cursed land in unholy storms and diseased mists. But Daenerys was no ordinary traveler. Her dragons circled overhead, their cries piercing the gloom. Drogon, black as midnight, soared close enough that she could feel the heat of his flames radiating over her bare arms. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, slightly more cautious yet drawn to the aura of power saturating the broken city. Here, the ghosts of their ancestors might still roam in the swirling shadows. She had come at a decisive time. The conflicts in Westeros had grown more vicious, alliances wearing thin, betrayals sharp as dragon steel. The dawn of her arrival across the narrow sea had burned bright with promise. Lords and small folk alike had whispered her name in huddled corners, longing for the break of a better day. She remembered how the Iron Throne, that twisted, jagged seat of power forged from 1,000 swords, had loomed in her dreams for so many years. And she had answered the call, arrived with her fleet, her armies, and her dragons, emblems of conquest. She had knelt not before any mortal, not truly, but before duty and destiny. With every step on Westerosi soil, Daenerys believed that she was finally claiming her birthright. But the land had been unkind. War ravaged the 7 kingdoms. Rival claimants, the monstrous threat of the White Walkers in the north, and the unyielding politics of powerful houses wove a tapestry of hostility that tested Daenerys's resolve. She tried to unify them all. She tried to break the wheel. She believed it was her duty to protect the people. Yet the closer she came to taking King's Landing, the more threads unraveled, the discovery of Jon Snow's true parentage, the tensions among her own advisors, the horrifying whispers that her dragons were unnatural beasts of destruction. And darkest of all, she felt a kindling of something inside her, an anger, a ferocity that she could not fully tame. Amid the chaos, fragments of rumor reached her ears. There was a prophecy hidden in the shattered remains of old Valyria, a prophecy bound to her bloodline. At first, she dismissed it as a trick or a misdirection. But the words came from Tyrion Lannister, Varys, even Jorah Mormont, each voice tinged with subtle dread, urging her that if it were real, it might hold both the truth and the doom of House Targaryen. The notion that her lineage had once walked these streets stirred her spirit. And so, far from the eyes of lords and ladies, Daenerys decided to risk the voyage, half sure it was madness but compelled by an instinct she could not deny. Now, as she stepped through the crumbling archways of a long-dead palace, the world seemed to shift. Arches that once shone with polished marble were carved into monstrous shapes by centuries of damage, the floors thick with ash and debris. The wind howled through broken columns, but the air held an eerie stillness that made the hairs on Daenerys's neck rise. She touched a wall etched with Valyrian glyphs. The words were older than the common tongue, older than the Free City's dialects, older perhaps than the Doom itself. She could only decipher a few lines from the half-crumbled script, but those words spoke directly to her soul: blood of the dragon, the chain and the flame, destiny undone. Her chest tightened. The glyph spoke of a child of the dragon who would come at the precipice of destruction, who held the power to either save the realm or become its undoing. The lines promised a choice, a singular crossroad from which all future centuries would spin. For a moment, Daenerys felt her breath catch in her throat. She had always believed she was destined for greatness, that she would remake the world. But to see it prophesied in ancient stone shook her more than the countless battles she had waged. Further on, she found a hall partially collapsed into the sea. Slender stepping stones led out over dark waters choked by strange fumes. It was there, in that half-sunken chamber, that she found the iron stand that once held a proud brazier. A mosaic of black and red tiles depicted a mighty dragon wreathed in flames, and at its center lay a shallow bowl of obsidian. Within it, dust and broken fragments of bone lay scattered. The moment she gazed upon them, a wave of dizziness crashed over her. She gripped the rim, forcing herself to remain upright. Drogon roared overhead, echoing her sudden surge of fear. It was then she saw something, an image, a flicker. In the swirling reflections of the water below, she witnessed a vision: King's Landing, scorched by dragon fire, the Red Keep crumbling under a storm of flame. And she was in the midst of it, astride Drogon, her face twisted with fierce resolve but also deep anguish. She saw women and children fleeing, charred remains in the streets, the anguish of a city under siege. All at once, Daenerys recognized her own part in the horror. She was both liberator and destroyer, crowned by swirling ashes. The vision shimmered and changed. Another flicker, a future where she turned her back on that devastation. She saw a fleet traveling east, away from Westeros, leading a new exodus. The banner of the Targaryen dragon fluttered over a city that was not King's Landing but something new, something untainted. In that vision, her eyes blazed not with madness, but with clear, resolute determination. She saw the people chanting her name, not in terror, but in hope. Panting, Daenerys stumbled back from the bowl and sank to her knees. A swirl of emotions warred in her heart. She had come all this way to claim her destiny. She had believed in the righteousness of her cause, in the idea that she would be a just and wise ruler for the Seven Kingdoms. Yet here, in the heart of her ancestral homeland, an ancient whisper suggested that to pursue the Iron Throne might result in a tragedy that would eclipse even the doom of Valyria. For a moment, she felt tears burn her eyes. Could she truly turn her back on everything she had worked for, everything she believed was her right? But the vision refused to fade from her mind, burning with a terrible clarity. She had always scorned the idea of being labeled the Mad King's daughter. She remembered all the nights she had whispered to herself that she was not her father, that she fought to break chains, not forge them anew. And yet the prophecy showed a path where her desire to save the realm led only to ruin. Another path pointed away from Westeros entirely, an unknown road. It was not a guarantee of peace or prosperity, but it promised something other than the inferno of the first vision. All that night, Daenerys roamed the blasted city, her heart caught between doubt and longing. She found relics of her ancestors, half-shattered dragon carvings. She found a battered mural that showed men and women with silver-gold hair forging swords in dragon fire. The tapestry of Valyria still pulsed with echoes of a civilization that once reigned supreme, and she could almost imagine the voices of her forebears urging her to heed the warnings etched into these ruins. By dawn, she was exhausted, covered in soot and salt from the choking air. Yet she felt a strange sense of clarity blossoming within her. Standing by Drogon's side, she gazed upon the lapping waters that swallowed half the city. The morning sun glowed in the eastern sky, painting the jagged spires in ghostly hues. Slowly, she placed a hand on the warm scales of her oldest dragon. Drogon's eyes, deep and ancient, flickered as if he too understood the gravity of this moment. In the distance, Rhaegal and Viserion glided, weaving their own silent guard over their queen. The next day, Daenerys sent word back to her most trusted advisors, summoning them to a small cove where the stone men did not lurk, where the waters were safer for landfall. Tyrion arrived first, nervously smoothing his beard, and behind him came Grey Worm, Missandei, and Ser Jorah, who had led the way to ensure it was safe. She ushered them around a makeshift campfire. The ground beneath their feet was a patchwork of obsidian shards, and the air smelled of sulfur. The hush that enveloped them was broken only by the quiet crackle of flames. She told them of the prophecy, of the visions she had seen in the swirling black waters, and what it might mean. To her surprise, the faces of her advisors did not show outright disbelief. Each one, in their own way, had brushed against the mysteries of this world. Ser Jorah recalled hearing tales of blood rites and curses that originated in these lands. Tyrion listened with a pale expression, as though he sensed the truth of it all the more keenly. Missandei held Daenerys' gaze with unwavering faith, though tears glimmered in her eyes at the notion of her queen forsaking Westeros. Grey Worm remained impassive on the surface, but she could sense the question in his silence. After all they had sacrificed, was she truly ready to leave the battlefield behind? Daenerys' voice wavered, but she pressed on. She spoke of the destruction that awaited King's Landing if she pursued it, of a city in flames and a queen succumbing to rage and fear. She confessed how the vision struck her with horror and forced her to confront her darkest doubts. Yes, she wanted the throne. Yes, she felt an unrelenting sense that it was hers by right. But if her claiming it would enact such horrors upon innocent lives, how could she call herself a breaker of chains? The thought weighed on her, and the burden felt heavier than any crown. Slowly, she revealed the second vision, a new beginning, far from the Seven Kingdoms, where she would forge a realm that did not suffer from the same cycles of vengeance. A place where her dragons could flourish without being seen as omens of doom. A place where the misfits, the broken, and the idealists could find sanctuary. It was vague, intangible, and the route to achieving it was uncertain. But in it she had seen hope in people's eyes, not fear. She let her words rest amid the hush of the ruined shore. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Tyrion cleared his throat, his mind clearly racing with 1,000 calculations. "Your Grace," he said softly, "your mercy is part of what makes you who you are. But so is your ambition. Are you certain you can give up the fight for the Iron Throne just like that? You've shed blood for it. Good men and women have died for it." Daenerys closed her eyes. "I do not dismiss their sacrifices, nor my own. but a vision of thousands more burning of me standing over the ashes makes a mockery of those sacrifices. If fate can be turned, if I can spare those lives, should I not do so? No one could provide a simple answer. Ser Jorah knelt, bowing his head. Whatever course you choose, Khaleesi, I will follow. Grey Worm pressed a fist to his chest, signifying the same. And Missandei, tears slipping down her cheeks, managed a trembling smile. We believe in you, Daenerys Stormborn. Tyrion's expression remained conflicted, but at last he bowed his head in deference. If this is the course that spares the realm from fire and blood, then perhaps the dream of a new world lies across uncharted waters. It was decided. Quietly, solemnly, Daenerys instructed them to spread a single message to the armies waiting across the sea in Westeros, to the allies who had fought beside her. She offered no condemnation nor bitter farewell, only a promise. That she would not unleash her dragons on the city of King's Landing. That she would not become a butcher as so many Targaryens before her. Instead, she urged those who believed in her vision of a free world to join her on a new path. Eastward, away from the Seven Kingdoms. Some would scoff and refuse, she knew. Some would feel betrayed. Yet she believed others would come, drawn by the possibility of building something untainted by the old hatreds. Within a fortnight, ships began to gather along the coast near Volantis, away from the prying eyes of Westerosi spies. The Dothraki, under the command of her loyal blood riders, joined the exodus, their hooves thundering over the grasslands. The Unsullied, their discipline unwavering, marched in formation, loyal to the queen who had freed them. Some Westerosi lords, disillusioned by the bitter wars, brought their families, risking everything to follow this silver-haired queen. A few ironborn, stirred by the prospect of sailing beyond known waters, pledged their ships to her cause. And some of the free folk from the north, guided by the name Targaryen in ways that defied logic, drifted south, curious about forging a new future. Daenerys found herself both mournful and strangely uplifted by this gathering. She watched as entire families, men, women, and children, boarded the vessels. She walked among them, her presence a mixture of regal command and gentle reassurance. She helped carry water barrels, spoke kindly to frightened children, and reminded herself that if she had chosen the Iron Throne, these very souls might have become casualties in the storms of war. The weight on her shoulders did not vanish, but it felt different now. She was forging a new path, an uncertain one, but one that might lead to a destiny unshackled from the ghosts of her ancestors. Finally, the day came when they set sail. The gathered fleet, a motley armada of ships from Essos, Westeros, and the Iron Islands, hoisted their sails on a bright morning. The wind tasted of salt and hope. Daenerys stood on the prow of her flagship, her dragons soaring overhead, their shadows dancing across the waters. She thought of the narrow straits behind her, the kings and queens battling for a throne she had once believed to be her own. She remembered the prophecy's warning. Remain, and the city would burn. Depart, and there might be another path. She felt a pang for all she left behind. Friends, foes, the memory of her ancestors' rule. But she also felt a swelling sense of freedom that she had never known. She did not travel blindly. She brought with her scribes from Old Town, mapmakers from Volantis, and the combined knowledge of sailors who had charted half the world. Together, they pored over ancient texts and legends, discovering lost routes beyond the known lands. Some rumored that east of the Bone Mountains, even further than the fabled kingdoms of the Jade Sea, lay unexplored continents. Others told tales of dragon lairs and hidden enclaves where Valyrian descendants might still linger. The more she learned, the more Daenerys felt certain her journey was only beginning. The Iron Throne, for all its power, had been a cage. Now she was free to shape her own legacy. As the coastline of Essos receded behind them, Daenerys took one last look westward. She whispered a prayer for those left behind, for Jon Snow, for Sansa, for Arya, for all the allies and enemies that had shared her path. She prayed that the White Walkers would be vanquished, that the realm would find peace without her dragon's devastation. She prayed that her name would not be spoken as a curse but as a memory of what might have been. Then she turned east, where the horizon stretched endless, the sunrise an omen of new beginnings. Weeks became months at sea. Storms tested their endurance. Sickness claimed some among the fleet, and Daenerys personally oversaw the healing efforts, calling on every remedy she had learned in her travels. The dragons hunted far from the ships, returning with monstrous fish and giant sea creatures, sharing in the bounty with the sailors. Their presence, once terrifying to many, became a source of comfort in the trackless ocean. In moments of dire need, Daenerys would climb onto Drogon's back to scout for land or direct the fleet away from hidden shoals. A camaraderie grew among the disparate peoples. Dothraki taught Westerosi knights how to ride bareback on the deck of ships, a sight that would have been deemed impossible only a year prior. Unsullied sparred with Valentine Sells-words, forging mutual respect. Noble children from the Reach played games of hide and seek with merchant children from the free cities. All were bound by one desire, to find this fabled new land or create one if they must. Daenerys, who had once struggled to unite even two factions, now guided a polyglot community that called her Mysa, called her Breaker of Chains, called her the Mother of Dragons. Through it all, Tyrion served as her chief counselor, devising ways to ration supplies, keep morale afloat, and quell disputes before they turned bloody. Missandei worked tirelessly as Daenerys' voice across linguistic divides, bridging gaps of culture and suspicion. Grey Worm oversaw security, ensuring that the fleet did not tear itself apart. Ser Jorah remained her loyal shadow, offering support whenever the burdens grew too heavy. Often, Daenerys found herself alone at night, standing near the ship's railing, staring at the moonlight on the ocean. In those quiet hours, she wrestled with the doubts that still lingered. Had she abandoned her birthright? Had she cheated her own lineage by fleeing? She thought of Rhaegal and Viserion, named for her dead brothers, and wondered if they, too, sensed her uncertainty. Yet each time the doubt threatened to consume her, she recalled the vivid images in the black waters of old Valyria. She remembered the screams of innocence, the charred skeletons lining the streets of King's Landing. She clenched her fists and reminded herself that she had chosen life. She had chosen hope. One morning, after a particularly savage storm, their lookout cried out a new call: land. The announcement rippled through the fleet, sending men and women to the decks in excitement. Daenerys, riding Drogon overhead, saw the outline of a lush coastline breaking through the morning mist. Dense forests, tall mountains rising behind them, a wide river mouth that opened like an invitation to explorers. No known chart or map they carried hinted at this place. Cautiously, the fleet approached the shore, dropping anchor just beyond the crashing waves. Daenerys circled once, scanning for any signs of civilization or threat. Then, with Grey Worm at her side, she led a landing party onto the beach, her dragons perching on rocky outcroppings to watch over their mother. The sand was pale and fine, and footprints of unknown creatures dotted the strand. Strange birds with brilliant plumage soared in the canopy of trees, their calls echoing in the humid air. As Daenerys stepped onto the new land, she felt a tingle along her spine. It was not the polished marble of King's Landing nor the dusty roads of Meereen. It was something wholly new, unclaimed by the great houses or the histories of old. In a soft voice, she whispered, "Home." And though the word hung uncertainly, she felt an answering warmth in her heart. She ordered the construction of a temporary camp just beyond the beach. Tents rose, fires were lit, and the people who had crossed half the world with her set about making themselves at least a semblance of comfort. Exploratory parties ventured inland, returning with reports of fruit-laden trees, freshwater springs, and abundant game. There were even signs of ancient ruins deeper in the forest, suggesting they were not the first humans to set foot here. As days slipped into weeks, the settlement grew. Barracks for the Unsullied, stables for the Dothraki horses, and improvised docks to mend and moor the ships. Farmsteads began to sprout beyond the immediate camp. Why? Seeds some had brought from Essos or Westeros, taking root in the fertile soil. Daenerys walked among her people every day, listening to their concerns, encouraging their hopes. There was an energy in the air, a sense that, despite the hardships, they were forging a place unburdened by the feuds of the past. Some began to call it New Valyria in homage to Daenerys' lineage, though she hesitated to formalize the name. In her mind, the shadow of the old empire was too ominous. Still, the moniker spread among the settlers. Yet not everything was idyllic. Strange creatures roamed the night. Roars echoed from the mountains, which might have been monstrous bears or something else altogether. Some of the Dothraki trackers reported glimpses of men in the distance, pale figures that melted away into the trees. Scouts found abandoned buildings of stone and vine, their architecture unlike anything known in Westeros or Essos. There was a sense of mystery here that set nerves on edge, and Daenerys knew she had to be vigilant. The last thing she wanted was a new war, but she would not lead her people into ignorance of potential threats. Cautiously, she sent out diplomatic missions led by Missandei, accompanied by a handful of Unsullied. Their task was to see if there were indeed natives in this land. Days turned into a fortnight before they returned, and their news was startling. They had encountered a small tribe living upriver. Communication was difficult, but Missandei's gift for languages helped break a modicum of understanding. The tribe seemed wary but not immediately hostile. They offered the envoys strange fruits and performed what looked like an honoring dance near a carved totem that resembled a dragon. This last revelation sent a thrill through Daenerys. Why would these distant people carve an image of her kin? She decided to meet them herself, not in haughty regalia but as a guest seeking friendship. Tyrion advised caution. Ser Jorah insisted on a strong guard. Daenerys, however, requested only a small retinue, trusting that her dragons were protection enough. When she arrived at the tribal settlement, she found mud-walled huts, gardens of bright flowers, and tall wooden posts bearing intricate carvings of scaled creatures. The men and women of the tribe watched with wide eyes as Drogon landed behind her, shaking the ground with his weight. But no scream of terror rang out. Instead, an elderly figure stepped forward, raising her hands in what seemed like welcome, uttering words Daenerys could not comprehend. Missandei did her best to parse the dialect, gleaning bits of meaning. Skyfire beast, mother, returned. Something profound passed between Daenerys and this elder. Though they spoke no common tongue, the woman touched Daenerys's silver hair, then gently patted her chest where the heart beat. She led Daenerys to the largest totem in the center of the village. It was indeed a dragon, carved from dark wood, wings spread as though to shelter the huts. The artistry was remarkable, especially for a people who seemed to have no metal tools. Daenerys reached out to touch the carving, feeling a pulse of recognition. She thought of the Valyrian glyphs in those haunted ruins, how they had led her here. The elder spoke again, and Missandei's eyes widened as she translated. She says that long ago, a visitor from the Skyfire came to them, a rider on a great winged beast. They believe it was centuries in the past. The rider taught them the secrets of fire and the forging of black stone, then left, promising to return one day. A chill ran down Daenerys' spine. Was it possible that some Valyrian dragon rider had come to these shores, leaving behind only legends? It tied too neatly with everything she had discovered, the illusions in the black waters, the call of her ancestral heritage. She met the elder's gaze and nodded in solemn respect. In that moment, she felt as though she stood at the nexus of history and legend. If a Valyrian had been here once, then perhaps this land was not just a blank slate but a place where the seeds of her heritage had been planted long ago. From that day on, a fragile bond formed between Daenerys' people and the tribe. They exchanged goods, textiles, and small crafts for fresh produce and medicinal herbs. The language barrier slowly began to erode as Missandei and others immersed themselves in learning from the natives. Tensions still flickered at times. Some of the younger warriors in the tribe were unsettled by the Unsullied's presence, while some of the Westerosi lords doubted the tribe's sincerity. But Daenerys endeavored to keep the peace. She believed that if she could forge trust here, she could avoid the pitfalls that once tore the Seven Kingdoms apart. And so the settlement blossomed. Houses of timber and stone replaced tents. Fields of wheat and barley swayed in the open glades. A training ground was set aside for the Unsullied and the Dothraki to maintain their skills. The dragons discovered roosts in the nearby mountains, each claiming a rocky outcrop as their domain. Often, Daenerys would mount Drogon and fly over the expanding colony, witnessing how the people thrived without the constant threat of war. It was not a utopia. Disease and disasters still plagued them, arguments still flared over resources, and cultural misunderstandings were frequent. But it was a life unburdened by the endless cycle of feuds that defined Westeros. In quieter moments, she allowed herself to imagine what might have happened if she had chosen differently. If she had marched on King's Landing, would she have truly become the monster of her nightmares? Perhaps. The thought haunted her enough that she clung to this path, determined to make it a success. She believed it was the truest way to honor all those who had died believing in her. By forging a place where no one had to fear the sound of dragons overhead. As the first year passed, Daenerys' advisors often remarked on how she seemed more at peace. She laughed more, joined celebrations and feasts, and took a genuine interest in the everyday lives of her people. The scars of her past, of betrayal and sacrifice, remained, but she carried them with a new sense of purpose. The settlement, now unofficially referred to as New Valyria, was becoming a mosaic of cultures bound by a single dream: to live free from the rot of old hatreds, guided by a queen who had once been a conqueror but now strove to be a builder. Yet as rumors of her new domains spread through trade routes and wandering sailors, the outside world took notice. Word reached the ears of the free cities of Karth, of Et, and inevitably back to Westeros. Some saw her rising colony as a threat, an unchecked power with dragons at its command. Others saw it as a land of opportunity, a place to escape debts, servitude, or tyrants. Ships began to arrive in greater numbers, carrying both adventurers and spies. Daenerys welcomed those who came in good faith, but she also knew that she must be cautious. Even in the remotest corner of the world, ambition and greed would find her. One evening, as she stood atop a newly constructed watchtower overlooking the harbor, Tyrion joined her. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and crimson that reminded her of dragonfire. Tyrion sipped a cup of honeyed wine, his expression contemplative. "Your Grace," he said, "it's been nearly 2 years since we left Westeros behind. Most of the people here think of this as home now. They even have their own little street of shops, blacksmiths, stables, everything a city needs. And yet I can't help but wonder, do you ever regret it?" Daenerys looked out over the bustling docks where men and women unloaded crates of exotic wood and fruit. Children ran along the shoreline, squealing as Drogon's shadow passed overhead. She took a breath, inhaling the salt air. "Sometimes I wonder what might have been if I'd stayed," she admitted. "But when I recall the visions of old Valyria, the horror etched into those stones, I know I made the right choice. The Iron Throne would have cost me my soul." Tyrion nodded, swirling the wine in his cup. "I won't dispute that. And you know, from what little I've heard of King's Landing, the city still stands. No dragons have razed its walls. Perhaps that alone is worth the price we paid." Daenerys placed a hand on the tower's railing, feeling the cool stone under her fingers. "If the realm can find peace without me, then so be it. I wish them well. Let them name their kings and queens. Let them squabble. I have no desire to return to that endless game. And you have a realm all your own here," Tyrion said, gesturing to the growing city beneath them. "One founded on new principles, though forging those principles is a challenge in itself." She smiled softly. "Yes, here we can experiment with freedom, with equity, with laws that do not serve only the powerful. It won't be perfect, but it might be better than what we left behind." Tyrion raised his cup as though in a toast, to a future shaped by choice rather than by prophecy. Daenerys' gaze drifted to Drogon, who perched atop a rocky cliff, his massive head scanning the ocean as though guarding them from unseen dangers. She recalled the day she first hatched her dragons, the nights under the stars in the Red Waste, the battles fought in Astapor and Meereen. The journey had been long and often cruel. But this place, this new land, felt like a chance to reclaim hope not just for herself, but for all who followed her. She silently toasted Tyrion's words in her heart, a future shaped by choice. She had chosen to break free from the cycle of fire and blood. And though she would forever be Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, the breaker of chains, she had found a new identity here, one that was not trapped by old legacies. The night wore on, stars blossoming in the sky like scattered diamonds. In the city below, torches flickered in the soft breeze. Laughter echoed from a tavern near the docks where some Dothraki and Westerosi braved a shared drinking contest. The swirl of a stringed instrument from the summer isles drifted on the air. This was a place of blending, where the past gave way to the present and tomorrow held more promise than dread. Then a horn blew, a single somber note that caught Daenerys' attention. She and Tyrion exchanged glances, descending the watchtower's stairs swiftly. At the dock, a battered ship limped into the harbor, sails torn, hull gashed. Daenerys recognized it as one of the smaller vessels that had departed to explore further east weeks ago. The survivors who stumbled off the deck collapsed onto the quay, their faces etched with horror. Ser Jorah was already there, barking orders to gather healers, checking the wounded. Daenerys pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside a young sailor whose skin was clammy and pale. Her eyes fluttered open, and she tried to speak. Daenerys held her hand gently, urging her to rest. The words that came through chattering teeth were faint, but Daenerys caught them. Monsters, scale and shadow, mountains. A chill brushed Daenerys' heart. Something out there threatened them, something worse than mere brigands or storms. If the old Valyrians had once set foot here, might they have awakened horrors that thrived in the dark corners of this land? She looked to Ser Jorah, who read her apprehension. Then she glanced at Tyrion, whose mind was already racing with possibilities. Softly, Daenerys stood, summoning Grey Worm to prepare a scouting party at first light. She would not sit idle while her people faced unknown terrors. She had not run from the White Walkers or the slavers of Essos, and she would not run now. That night, as she lay in her quarters, she could not banish thoughts of the wounded sailors and the horrors they had described. Scales and shadow, words that resonated with something primal in her. Her dragons had scales, but they were protectors. What else might roam these lands with scaled hides and predatory eyes? Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of a labyrinth of twisted stone where monstrous shapes slithered and hissed. At dawn, she rose determined. Armored in a new style that blended Westerosi steel with the lighter plates of Essos, she took to Drogon's back. Grey Worm, a contingent of Unsullied, and a handful of Dothraki archers followed on foot, forging a path toward the mountains described by the few sailors who could still speak. Tyrion insisted on joining despite the dangers. Missandei stayed behind to manage the settlement and tend to the refugees. Ser Jorah rode by her side atop a sturdy mare, glancing up anxiously at Drogon overhead. They traveled days into thick jungle, crossing serpentine rivers and forging precarious passes. Evidence of some massive creature's passage appeared, swaths of broken trees, footprints half-filled with muddy water. Strange calls echoed at night, setting the horses on edge. But Daenerys pressed on, the memory of her prophecy surging within her. She had left Westeros to escape a vision of devastation, yet here she was facing another unknown threat. Would the cost of forging a new realm always demand blood? On the 5th day, they came upon a deep valley split by a black river. Massive caves punctured the cliff walls, their dark mouths breathing a foul odor of decay. It was there they found the remnants of the missing ship's crew who had ventured inland. Bodies half-eaten, scattered gear, a sight that turned even the hardened Unsullied pale. Her heart clenched. She had promised these people a better life, yet here lay the evidence of her failure to protect them. With a slow, seething exhale, Daenerys dismounted. She and the scouting party advanced carefully, weapons drawn. A sudden roar tore through the valley, a sound unlike any dragon's call. From one of the cavern mouths, a shape emerged, a reptilian beast the size of a small ship, its hide mottled green and brown, its jaws bristling with needle-like teeth. It possessed a ridged back reminiscent of dragon spines, but its body slithered with serpentine grace. Daenerys' eyes widened. If this was some distant cousin of the dragons, it was a twisted reflection, lacking the regal intelligence she knew in Drogon and his brothers. The beast roared again, and Daenerys could see the remnants of clothing tangled between its teeth. "Hold fast!" Grey Worm barked, forming a shield wall with the Unsullied. Dothraki archers knocked arrows. Drogon swooped overhead, responding to the monstrous challenge with his own roar. In that instant, Daenerys faced a primal battle, Valyrian dragon against unknown scaled horror. Her heart pounded. She climbed onto Drogon's back, the familiarity of his scales beneath her giving her a surge of confidence. If she was truly the blood of the dragon, she would prove it here, defending the life she was building. With a mighty flap of his wings, Drogon took to the air, circling the valley. The beast on the ground lunged forward, surprising the Unsullied with a burst of speed. Spears and arrows met its armored hide, some breaking, others embedding shallowly. It shrieked in pain, whipping its tail to send men flying. Daenerys ordered Drogon to breathe fire. A jet of flame erupted from his maw, engulfing the beast's head and neck. Its scales blackened, flesh charring. But even ablaze, it thrashed, snapping its jaws. Daenerys guided Drogon lower, pressing the assault, unwilling to show mercy to this devourer of her people. At last, with a final roar that shook the canyon walls, the creature collapsed in a smoking heap, its body curled in death throes. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors. Grey Worm stood, spear in hand, scanning for more threats. Dany's chest heaved as she patted Drogon's neck, grateful they had triumphed. Yet her victory was tempered by sorrow. Men lay dead or injured, the remnants of lost scouts lay unburied. She dismounted, her legs trembling with adrenaline. Ser Jorah approached, face grim. "We should burn the bodies, Khaleesi. Both ours and that thing's. No one should see them as prey." She nodded, her throat tight. "Do it. And search the caves. Make sure there are no others." The Unsullied set to work. Dothraki archers guarded the perimeter, eyes scanning for movement. Daenerys stepped closer to the fallen beast, examining its charred scales. She could not help but feel a strange pity. It was a living creature, no more evil by nature than a lion or a wolf. But it had threatened her people, devoured them. Fire was her answer. She was not the gentle queen now, she was the dragon rider. The paradox chilled her. She had come here to escape a future of raining fire on cities, only to unleash it on the beasts of this new land. Was fate mocking her? Or did this simply prove that some battles were unavoidable no matter where she fled? Hours later, after the pyres were lit and the fallen were honored, she and her forces made camp at the valley's edge. The bitterness of smoke filled the air. Daenerys sat on a flat stone by the river, staring at the flickering flames. Tyrion settled beside her, folding his arms across his knees. "A grim business, your grace," he said softly. "But at least we know what lurks in these parts, or at least a glimpse." She sighed, brushing a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "We left one war behind, and here we are in another. Smaller, perhaps, but deadly. Is this to be our lot? Fighting for survival wherever we go?" Tyrion offered a faint, ironic smile. "Survival is the first war every living creature wages. But we also forge new bonds, new solutions. Today we slew a monster. Tomorrow we might discover a way to coexist. After all, we humans are the real beasts sometimes, are we not?" Daenerys' gaze flickered to the dancing flames. A memory of King's Landing ablaze momentarily flashed in her mind, the nightmare she had thwarted by leaving. She nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is true. We adapt or we perish." The next morning they explored the caves and found only the beast's lair, bones of animals, scraps of clothing, scattered gold trinkets. It seemed solitary, a rare predator. That was some small comfort. Still, Daenerys ordered the cave sealed, collapsing the entrances with dragon fire and the labor of the Unsullied. She would not risk any brood nest hatching a new threat. In the days that followed, they returned to the settlement bearing the grim news of what they had faced. Grief mingled with relief that the menace was gone. The encounter sobered the entire colony. It reminded them that this land was wild, that with new beginnings came new dangers. But it did not break their resolve. In fact, it galvanized them. The story of Daenerys atop Drogon, defeating the monstrous worm, spread among the natives and newcomers alike. Even the wary tribespeople began to see her as a protector rather than a threat. So the colony continued to grow, forging alliances with neighboring tribes, mapping new territories, taming the land bit by bit. Years passed. Daenerys' silver hair gained a few strands of white, but her spirit remained unbowed. She governed not as a distant monarch but as a guiding force, setting up councils and assemblies, encouraging the voices of the people. Under her watchful gaze, multiple towns sprang up along the coast and inland rivers. Roads were built, trade flourished. The dragons matured, claiming distinct ranges in the mountains. Sometimes Daenerys would ride them to keep the bond strong. She loved each of her children, mindful that they were living creatures of immense power. They demanded respect and a firm hand, but they were also symbols of what she had left behind and what she had embraced. The settlement, now officially called New Valor, by the tens of thousands who lived there, was far from perfect. Disputes over land and resources sometimes escalated to violence. Minor outbreaks of disease occasionally ravaged a village. Tensions with certain tribes who worshipped the beasts of the forest as sacred tested Daenerys' diplomatic patience. But whenever calamity struck, she met it head-on, not with the arrogance of a conqueror but with the humility of a leader who remembered slavery and exile. The lessons of Essos and Westeros guided her. A just law must be tempered by mercy, unity must respect diversity, power must serve the people, or it becomes tyranny. And in all that time, she never forgot the prophecy in Old Valyria, the haunting images that had driven her away from the Seven Kingdoms. It was as if that cursed city had offered her a choice, to perpetuate the cycle of fire and blood or to break free from it. She had chosen. She had left Westeros, forsaking the Iron Throne. Sometimes she imagined how the realm fared, whether a just ruler sat on that spiked seat of swords, whether the lords still warred among themselves. She hoped that somehow the White Walkers had been defeated, that good people endured. Yet she felt no desire to return, for her place was here. The prophecy had warned of doom if she remained, but promised a path of rebirth if she departed. The life around her each day, the laughter of children safe under her watch, the alliances forged with natives who once hid from outsiders, this was that rebirth, lived out in every sunrise. One evening, long after the golden glow of the sun had faded, she stood on the same watchtower where she had once debated regrets with Tyrion. He was older now, his hair streaked with gray, but his wit undimmed. She leaned over the railing, gazing at the city lights of New Valyria, at the torches flickering in the harbor, at the silhouette of Drogon perched on a distant peak. She took a deep breath, letting a sense of calm settle over her. There were whispers that some lords from Westeros had arrived in neighboring ports, seeking an audience with the Dragon Queen to discuss alliances or expansions. The world was catching up to her. She did not fear it as she once might have. For she had chosen her destiny, shaped it with her own hands, forging something far from the madness of her father or the tragedies of her ancestors. Bowing her head, Daenerys closed her eyes. She did not know what the next years would bring. There would be new challenges, new hopes, new heartbreaks. But as long as she lived, she would strive to live in harmony with the power she wielded, to protect rather than to conquer. She would stand by her promise never to become the monster she had feared in that bleak vision. She had walked away from the Iron Throne and found something greater, a realm united not by fear, but by shared purpose. She felt the wind brush over her face, carrying the scent of salt and night-blooming flowers. Somewhere in that breeze, she could almost hear the echo of her own voice, repeating the words she had read on the Valyrian glyphs so long ago: blood of the dragon, the chain and the flame, destiny undone. And so Daenerys Targaryen, storeborn of the House Targaryen, first of her name, breaker of chains, mother of dragons, stood atop her new world, neither saint nor conqueror, but a woman who chose mercy over wrath, who listened to the cautionary ghosts of her lineage, and who, by leaving the Seven Kingdoms behind, discovered a land where she could finally belong. She felt the fire within her burn steadily, not the raging blaze of war, but the gentle warmth of a hearth that welcomes and protects. In that moment, she understood that prophecies are not chains but doors, ones you can choose to close or walk through. She had walked through, and in doing so, she had broken the cycle that once threatened to consume her. Beyond the horizon, the future awaited, its shape uncertain but filled with possibilities that only the Mother of Dragons could have conjured from the ashes of an ancient doom. Daenerys looked out over the harbor of New Valyria in the stillness of early dawn. A faint haze drifted across the water as fishing boats set out, their lanterns bobbing like stars on the surface of a dark sky turned upside down. From her vantage atop the watchtower, she could hear the distant calls of dockworkers, mingled with the rattle of chains and pulleys hauling goods from arriving ships. In the crisp morning air, everything felt fresh, unburdened by the weight of old wars. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the feeling. Here, far from the spiked throne and the labyrinth of treachery that had defined her youth, she was forging something new. Yet the world, vast and hungry, continued to evolve around her. She wondered how long this fragile peace would last before being tested once again. Grey Worm met her on the tower's highest platform. He wore the armor that melded in eastern lightness with Westerosi steel plating. His demeanor was steady, unwavering. Even in these calmer times, he carried himself with the quiet discipline of a soldier. Bowing his head in salute, he said, "Your Grace, the scouts report that Westerosi envoys have arrived at the outer edges of the territory. We intercepted them near the River of Fallen Leaves." Daenerys turned to face him, wind lifting a few silver strands from her braid. "Envoys," she repeated softly. "I suppose word has truly spread then. Did they give a name or house?" They wore a banner bearing the sigil of House Glover from the north. But they traveled alongside men who displayed a sigil of House Valerion from the Crownlands. "It's a mixed retinue. They claim peaceful intentions." She lifted one brow. "Glover and Valerion together. Strange bedfellows, but these are strange times." Grey Worm nodded. "They request an audience. I had them escorted to the guest quarters near the eastern gate. They seem uncertain, Your Grace. They made no hostile moves." "Very well." She paused, remembering the Glover words, "The North remembers." She wondered whether that phrase still carried the same old resentments or if time had dulled the bitterness once held toward Targaryens. "I will see them once the morning preparations are done. Ask Missandei and Tyrion to join me in the throne hall." Grey Worm left and Daenerys lingered a moment longer. Below, the city began to stir in earnest. Children scampered along the freshly laid stone streets, chasing after each other with wooden swords. Vendors called out from stalls, offering fruit from local orchards that had taken root in the fertile soil. Farther along, she spotted some of the Dothraki riders tending to their horses, the beasts flicking their tails in the damp air. The settlement, once a cluster of tents pitched on a beach, had grown into a sprawling town. Timber structures gave way to more permanent stone buildings erected with the help of the locals who had once lived in the surrounding forests. Indeed, this was a tapestry of cultures, Westerosi carpenters sharing designs with freedmen from Meereen, Dothraki teaching writing techniques to wide-eyed reach men, and scribes from Old Town poring over half-faded scrolls discovered in ancient ruins beyond the mountains. All of it stood testament to the hard-earned peace Daenerys had nurtured. When she finally descended the tower's spiraling steps and emerged into the open courtyard, Tyrion Lannister was waiting at the base, leaning on his cane, an unfortunate necessity following an old injury he had sustained years ago. Though still sharp-witted, the passing of time had slowed him a fraction. He greeted her with a small bow. Your Grace, I assume you've heard of our visitors from Westeros. She gave a wry smile. I have. House Glover and House Valyrian, side by side. It almost makes me nostalgic, Tyrion, to think of the old days when everything was decided by sigils and alliances. He tapped the base of his cane on the stone. Well, those old days are never truly gone, I fear. But let us hope they come bearing more civility than demands. Hope, Daenerys echoed. Yes, hope. We always cling to it. She motioned for him to join her as she walked toward the throne hall. Have you been able to speak with them yet? No, Grey Worm had them quarantined in a small compound for safety. I've heard only scattered remarks from the Unsullied who escorted them in. They're curious, apparently. More than one was startled to see the dragons roosting in the mountains. She folded her arms. They traveled far to reach us. I wonder what they want. Trade, perhaps? Or maybe they seek your support. The Seven Kingdoms, by all accounts, have been fractious since we left. Though the White Walkers were defeated thanks to alliances in the north, so rumor has it, peace did not exactly linger. Every generation, a new squabble arises, does it not? Daenerys' expression tightened. Indeed, and we cannot pretend we'll remain forever apart. The world knows about us now. I can feel it turning toward us. They reached the grand doors to the throne hall, carved from dark wood. Two Unsullied in polished breastplates stood guard, crossing spears in silent salute before opening the doors. Inside, the hall was simple compared to the ostentation of Westerosi keeps, yet still regal in its own right. Pillars of local stone flanked a central walkway leading up to a raised platform where Daenerys' seat stood. It was not an iron monstrosity hammered from the swords of conquered enemies, but a curved seat carved from a single massive block of obsidian that had been discovered near the dormant volcanoes inland. Smooth to the touch, it gleamed with flecks of crimson. Behind it, a mosaic of a three-headed dragon sparkled, made from countless tiny stones in black, red, and gold. The mosaic had been painstakingly crafted by artisans from Meereen and the tribal communities alike, symbolizing unity rather than subjugation. Missandei was already present, waiting near the seat. She dipped her head, her warm smile illuminating her face. Over the years, she had grown even more adept at languages, bridging cultural gaps that might otherwise have led to violence. Your Grace, she greeted softly. The envoys await outside. Shall I bring them in when you are ready? Daenerys settled onto the obsidian throne. Every time she sat there, she recalled the day she had turned her back on the Iron Throne. This seat felt cooler, more grounding. She nodded. Yes, bring them forth. Missandei bowed and vanished through a side corridor. Daenerys adjusted the drape of her light, gray and silver gown, letting her hands rest on the armrests of her seat. Tyrion took his place to the right, standing with the assistance of his cane. A few Unsullied lined the walls, as well as some Dothraki bloodriders wearing loose-fitting silks. They were ceremonial guards now, more often used to keep the peace within the city than to wage war. Moments later, the envoys entered. The first was a tall, stern-faced man in well-worn traveling leathers. The sigil of House Glover, a mailed fist, was embroidered on his doublet. Snow dusted his cloak's hem. Despite the tropical warmth of New Valyria, clearly, he had traveled from a far colder climate and hadn't changed out of custom. The second figure, more regal in bearing, wore a tunic of dark blue with silver fastenings, House Valyrian's colors. He looked slightly younger, with high cheekbones and watchful eyes. They advanced cautiously, gazing around the hall with unveiled curiosity. The Glover man bowed first. Daenerys Targaryen, Stormborn, Queen of New Valyria. His voice had the clipped accent of the north. I am Lord Gabbard Glover. My companion is Ser Eustace Valyrian. We come on behalf of certain lords in Westeros who, he paused, seemingly searching for the right words, seek to open a dialogue with your grace. Daenerys inclined her head. You are welcome, Lord Glover. Ser Valyrian, welcome as well. It has been many years since I left Westeros behind. What brings you across the seas now? Ser Eustace stepped forward, bowing with noticeable courtesy. Your Grace, I bring salutations from Lord Ethan Valyrian, my father. He remembers House Valyrian's ancient ties to House Targaryen, the shared Valyrian blood in our veins. Though the centuries have parted us in many ways, we have not forgotten. My father bid me say that your presence, and that of your dragons, is still spoken of in hushed tones along the narrow sea. Daenerys studied him. I recall that House Valyrian once supported my ancestors, yes. And House Glover stood for the North's independence in many wars. Tell me, do you come here representing the king in Westeros? She had heard rumors that the Iron Throne was now occupied by a distant Baratheon cousin, someone who claimed lineage from Gendry Baratheon, the legitimized son of Robert. But truths changed quickly across the sea. Lord Glover's lips thinned. The realm is not so simple these days, your grace. The Iron Throne is held by those who style themselves rightful monarchs, but the North has often distanced itself. In truth, we come to you not under any royal banner, but as part of a coalition of houses seeking a mutual benefit. Tyrion spoke up quietly. A coalition, you say? Of what nature? Ser Eustace nodded. Of houses troubled by the crown's endless demands, by the greed of certain courtiers, and by conflict that threatens to tear Westeros apart again. We believe your influence could guide us toward stability or at least offer an alternative. Some among us recall your attempt to unite Westeros against the White Walkers all those years ago. We have not forgotten that it was you who brought dragons north to fight for all living. Daenerys' expression remained carefully composed. She knew well how flattery could be used to open negotiations. I did my duty against the undead, and I also recall much resistance, distrust, and how that eventually weighed on every alliance I tried to forge. Lord Glover's eyes flickered with guilt or perhaps regret. True enough, your grace. The North was never quick to embrace Targaryen rule. I do not deny that. But times change, and we have seen what came after your departure. The realm was spared a bloody sacking of King's Landing, but not a day goes by without talk of how thin the alliances are. The new king, if he can truly be called that, keeps a tenuous grip on the south. The faith militant is re-emerging, fanatics who whisper that dragons are abominations. Tensions flare between the Reach and the Iron Islands. And the Lannisters, well, suffice to say, they've found new ways to meddle. Daenerys let those words settle. She had known a measure of peace for years now, had even started to believe she might never again hear the names of those old players who had once surrounded her. She glanced at Tyrion, whose expression revealed little. He must have known that House Lannister's capacity for intrigue would endure, but perhaps hearing it aloud stirred memories he'd rather keep buried. "And what exactly do you want of me?" she asked. "I have built this realm in the east to be free from the cycles of Westerosi feuds. I do not wish to become a piece on your chessboard." Ser Eustace shook his head quickly. "We do not seek to entangle you in another war, your grace. Rather, we propose a formal alliance of trade and mutual defense. Our lands are threatened by certain expansions and brigands who test the weakening boundaries of the North and the Vale. We would pay a fair sum and supply valuable resources to gain your support. Not necessarily your armies on our soil, but perhaps the presence of your dragons would deter open aggression. Or your name alone, allied with us, might cause would-be invaders to hesitate." Lord Glover cleared his throat. "In simpler terms, we need a strong partner whose power is beyond question. Your power is legendary. A rumor of your dragons is worth more than 100 men in the field." Silence followed as Daenerys weighed their request. Once she had longed for such recognition from Westerosi houses, had burned with a desire to rule them. Now she found herself strangely detached. She had carved out a place of her own, nurtured it through toil and compassion. Did she dare risk the progress by stepping back into the quagmire of Westeros? Tyrion leaned on his cane. "Your grace, might I speak freely?" "Always, Tyrion." His gaze flicked from her to the envoys. "Westeros has a way of dragging powerful figures into its labyrinth. Even if you merely sign a trade agreement, there will be those who spin it into a reason to fear or hate you. The faith militant, as they mention, sees dragons as sins against the natural order. The Lannisters, if they have any measure of their old cunning, will swiftly brand you a threat the moment you stir from these shores. Are we prepared for that?" Daenerys considered his words. Her mind drifted to the memory of her father's downfall, to her own tumultuous efforts to free the slaves of Essos, to the suspicion she had encountered when she landed in Dragonstone. "You speak truth, Tyrion. Yet trade alliances could benefit our people. We have grown much here, but we still need certain raw materials that Westeros can provide. And if we allow them only minimal contact, we risk fueling suspicion anyway. Perhaps a measured approach is best." She turned her gaze back to the envoys. "I will not send my dragons to Westeros to menace your foes. Nor will I commit soldiers to a fight that does not threaten my realm. But I am open to discussing a commercial and cultural exchange. If your coalition is genuine and if you respect our sovereignty, I am willing to explore an alliance. However, if your intention is merely to manipulate me into toppling your enemies, that will not happen." Lord Glover bowed again, relief visible in the set of his shoulders. "We understand, your grace. We do not seek to manipulate you. Our people are weary of war and political chaos. If you would grant us the chance to prove our good faith, we would be grateful." Daenerys felt the old stir of caution and curiosity swirl in her. After so many years away, the mention of Westerosi troubles still roused conflicting emotions: pity, wariness, a faint echo of sorrow. But she recognized an opportunity for mutual benefit. And if forging alliances could spare future bloodshed for her people or for innocents abroad, perhaps it was worthwhile. Very well. You shall remain here as honored guests while we negotiate the terms of such an arrangement. My advisors and I will draft a proposal. For now, rest, explore the city. I want you to see for yourselves what we have built. Their expressions lifted at that. Ser Eustace placed a hand over his heart in a gesture of respect. Thank you, your grace. We hope to learn much. Miss Sandii motioned for them to follow her, leading them out into the corridor. The hall's doors closed, leaving Daenerys alone with Tyrion and a handful of unsullied guards. She exhaled slowly, her posture relaxing. So it begins, she murmured. Tyrion inclined his head. You knew it would come eventually. The realm you left behind can't remain separated forever. People talk, and talk leads to journeys. She rose from the throne, stepping off the platform. Yes. Now let us hope we can guide the talk toward peace rather than another battlefield. Outside, she found the day had brightened, the sun cresting over the settlement's rooftops. Daenerys headed toward the aviary where trained hawks and ravens were kept, a newly established method of communication that Tyrion had organized with scribes from Old Town. She wanted to send out a short message to the other known tribes in the region, information about Westerosi envoys. It was crucial to keep her allies informed, so no rumors spiraled out of control. She refused to sow distrust in the hearts of the locals who had welcomed her. As she walked, she passed a small cluster of children enthralled by two Dothraki warriors practicing a dance of blades in a courtyard. Their eyes shone with wonder at each swift, precise strike. That sense of awe and possibility was what she hoped to preserve. Reaching the aviary, she informed the attending scribe of the contents she wished to send. He carefully penned a brief message in High Valyrian, sealed it, and attached it to the slender leg of a hawk. With a graceful leap, the bird soared into the sky, heading eastward across the forest canopy. Daenerys watched it until it vanished against the horizon. In that distant green expanse stood tribal villages, farmland, rolling hills, and mountain passes that concealed unknown beasts and hidden enclaves. Once upon a time, she had traveled with a single-minded obsession for the Iron Throne, unstoppable in her drive. Now, she governed with the knowledge that every corner of the world could contain allies or dangers, or both. Your Grace, a voice said from behind, and she turned to see Ser Jorah Mormont, older now but still strong in presence, approaching with a respectful nod. I heard of the envoys from Westeros. She smiled, warmed by the sight of her loyal knight. Yes, old friends and old burdens, it seems. They want alliances. His brow furrowed slightly. Are you ready to entertain such offers? She let out a pensive sigh. Ready or not, they are here. We must balance caution with opportunity. You've always said we should keep an open mind, as we did when forging alliances across the narrow sea so long ago. He nodded, recalling the old days in Pentos, Karth, and Astapor. Very well, Khaleesi. I will see that security is maintained. The city's grown large, and we have many visitors. We must ensure no harm befalls you or anyone else. She placed a hand on his arm. I appreciate your vigilance, but remember we are not in Westeros. We greet them as equals, not as conquering victors or beggars. Let them see that we have built a realm of peace. Jorah inclined his head. Understood. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and tasks. The city buzzed with news of the visitors, curiosity mingling with a hint of apprehension. Some of the freedmen from Essos had bitter memories of oppression by lords with sigils. Others from Westeros were eager to hear tidings of the old homeland. Daenerys conducted a routine inspection of the city's granaries, speaking with farmers who had successfully cultivated wheat and barley in fields once overgrown with wild shrubs. She paid her respects at a shrine the local tribes had erected to honor the Skyfire beast, believed to have visited their ancestors. In a merging of customs, some in the settlement lit small candles there to remember lost loved ones. By evening, she returned to the throne hall for a formal banquet in honor of the envoys. Long tables had been set with platters of roasted meats, tropical fruits, and spiced wines from Volantis. Soft music played in the background, courtesy of traveling minstrels who had settled in New Valyria. Daenerys sat at the head table, flanked by Tyrion, Missandei, Grey Worm, and her blood riders. The envoys were given places of honor, their eyes gleaming at the array of exotic dishes. Ser Eustace raised his cup. To Daenerys Stormborn, whose realm shines like a beacon across the seas, may friendship flourish. Around him, the small retinue of Westerosi knights echoed his toast, some more enthusiastically than others. Daenerys inclined her head in acknowledgement. She sipped her wine, tasting the subtle sweetness. You have traveled far. I hope our hospitality warms your hearts. It does, Your Grace, Lord Glover said, and we are eager to learn more about your domain. I must say, these foods, some I've never tasted before, and the city itself is so alive with all manner of folk. Tyrion smiled. Yes, well, we prefer variety to monotony here. You'll find more languages spoken in a single street than you might hear across an entire Westerosi kingdom. Conversation flowed. The Westerosi asked questions about governance, about how Daenerys balanced the needs of so many cultures under one banner. They marveled at the notion of an elected council that handled day-to-day legislation. Tyrion explained the settlement's evolution from a ragtag group to a structured society, how they'd integrated local tribes and freed slaves alike, forging new laws that valued equality before the queen. Daenerys provided measured answers, careful to highlight the principles of mutual respect that underpinned everything. And though the envoys listened politely, she could sense they were unsure how such a system might translate to Westeros, where noble lineage often trumped merit. As the banquet wound down, Daenerys rose to offer a closing remark. She stood, silver hair braided around her shoulders, the torchlight reflecting off the obsidian mosaic behind her. Lord Glover, Ser Valerion, all of our guests from across the sea, I welcome you to remain here for as long as you require. In the coming days, we will draft the terms of a potential alliance. While we do so, I invite you to speak openly with our people. Learn how we govern, how we trade, and what we value. Above all, I hope you come to see that this realm stands for cooperation, not conquest. We have turned from the past's shadowed paths and seek a future lit by understanding. A ripple of applause and murmured approval followed. The envoys bowed, evidently impressed. Daenerys retook her seat, noticing the relief on Tyrion's face. Tonight had gone well enough. Yet in her heart, she felt the first tendrils of an old anxiety swirling. The more she opened her doors, the more likely that some in Westeros, perhaps many, would see her renewed ties as a threat. And if history taught her anything, threats often led to conflict. Late that night, she found herself walking along the moonlit promenade near the harbor. Drogon soared overhead, a silent guardian of the skies. The waves lapped gently against the hulls of docked ships. She paused by the water's edge, reflecting on the fateful decision she had made years ago in old Valyria. Back then, she had glimpsed a vision of horror, King's Landing aflame under her rage, and chosen to flee that destiny. She still believed it was the right choice. But the question lingered, had she truly escaped the forces that bound her lineage to strife, or was that doom simply circling back, slower but inevitable? As though sensing her thoughts, Drogon descended and landed on a rocky outcropping nearby. She walked closer, resting a palm against his massive flank. His scales were warm, his breathing deep. He rumbled softly in recognition. In his onyx eye, she saw her own reflection. "We will not repeat the sins of the past," she whispered. "No matter what comes." The next few days passed in a flurry of discussion. Missandei, Tyrion, and Grey Worm helped Daenerys negotiate with the Westerosi envoys, drafting the framework of a trade pact. It included provisions for the exchange of grain, timber, iron, and knowledge, ship designs from the Iron Islands, advanced irrigation methods from the tribes of New Valyria. In return, the coalition in Westeros would send raw metals, silver, refined steel, and certain livestock that the new realm lacked. No mention was made of direct military intervention. Daenerys insisted on a mutual defense clause that would only be triggered if outside forces directly threatened the trade routes between their realms. She wanted no illusions of a looming invasion force. It was delicate, requiring careful phrasing and a clear statement that the Seven Kingdoms did not possess authority over New Valyria, nor vice versa. While the negotiations unfolded, the envoys wandered the city. Daenerys encouraged them to speak with the populace, hoping they would return to Westeros with an honest perspective. Ser Eustace seemed genuinely curious, conversing with foreign craftsmen and scribes, sampling the local foods. Lord Glover was quieter, more cautious, though occasionally she spotted him smiling at the sight of children playing or at a festival dance performed by the Dothraki. He was a man of the north, and the climate here likely felt alien, but perhaps the warmth of the people had made some impression on him. After a lengthy session of debates regarding tariffs and transport, Tyrion set down his quill with a groan. "I believe that covers the bulk of the trade agreement," he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Your Grace, if you are satisfied, then all that remains is to formalize it with a signing." Daenerys glanced over the parchment. "I am. Is it fair to all parties?" "As fair as can be expected," Tyrion replied. "We have hammered out protections so that neither side exploits the other. And we've set methods of dispute resolution overseen by a neutral council of merchant representatives. It's quite the modern approach, if I may say so." She smiled faintly. "Then let us finalize it." The signing took place in the throne hall. Envoys from House Glover, House Valerian, and several other lesser houses affixed their signatures and seals. Daenerys, as Queen of New Valyria, signed alongside Tyrion as her hand. Missandei witnessed, her graceful script in multiple languages marking the document as authentic. When the last wax seal cooled, Lord Glover rose, inclining his head respectfully. "Your Grace, I thank you. May this be the foundation of a lasting friendship." Ser Eustace nodded in agreement. "We will deliver the news to our coalition at once. I hope we can keep communication open. Perhaps in time we may even invite you to send an emissary to our lands." Daenerys offered a measured smile. "We shall see. For now, let trade bind us closer. Let the world see that the Dragon Queen does not demand fire and blood, but rather peace and prosperity." When the envoys departed aboard their ships, the city turned out to watch. No horns of war blared, only the well-wishes of merchants who hoped to profit from the new arrangement. Daenerys stood on a marble pier, waving farewell. She caught sight of Ser Eustace gazing back at her from the ship's deck. He raised his arm in a silent salute. Then the sails unfurled and Westeros receded from view, at least physically. Daenerys knew it would return, in one form or another, and perhaps faster than she liked. In the months that followed, trade did indeed flourish. Ships bearing the sigils of various Westerosi houses docked in New Valyria's harbor, unloading ingots of steel, crates of salted meats, and even seeds for northern vegetables that might adapt to warmer climates. In return, they departed laden with spices, exotic fruits, and wondrous crafts that blended Dothraki leatherwork with Essosi gem cutting. A cautious optimism spread among the people. Some worried that an influx of outsiders could threaten their harmony, but Daenerys assured them that robust laws protected local rights and resources. She also encouraged cultural exchange, establishing a small academy where Westerosi scholars studied side by side with tribal elders and Essosi philosophers. During this time, Daenerys's dragons prospered. Drogon remained the largest, his scales dark as the night sky. Rhaegal and Viserion roamed more widely, sometimes disappearing for days, only to return with fresh game and triumphant roars. Even so, each dragon answered her call when she flew overhead. The bond they shared was a living testament to her identity as a Targaryen, yet now it served more as a bridge between worlds than a weapon of conquest. She sometimes recalled the monstrous worm they had slain in the mountains. Proof that not every scaled creature was a friend. But her dragons had adapted to the new land as fully as she had, forging their own domains in the wild spires that formed a ring around the lush central valley. Not all was peaceful, though. Reports reached her of pirate activity in the western seas, preying on merchant vessels traveling under Westerosi banners. Rumors suggested these pirates hailed from the Basilisk Isles, a lawless region known for slavers and cutthroats. Daenerys, determined to honor her pledge to protect the trade routes, sent out warnings that such piracy would not be tolerated. She authorized a small naval force, vessels from the Ironborn who had followed her long ago, coupled with newly built war galleys from the settlement, to patrol the waters near the Basilisk Isles. The show of force was enough to scatter some of the brigands, but not all. Skirmishes ensued, costing lives on both sides. While none of these clashes escalated into full-scale war, it reminded Daenerys that maintaining peace demanded vigilance. The larger threat manifested in a different manner. One sultry evening, a merchant ship arrived from Volantis, bearing news that spread through the city like wildfire. The faith militant had denounced Daenerys Targaryen as a heretic and abomination. According to travelers, the High Septon in King's Landing had delivered a sermon calling the dragons an affront to the Seven, labeling them demons in scaled flesh. He proclaimed that any alliance with Dragakind was a sin that threatened the soul of Westeros. Worse still, rumors suggested that certain lords, possibly swayed or coerced by the faith, were beginning to question the growing ties to New Valyria. There was talk of a new wave of zealots rising, reminiscent of the sparrows who had once terrorized King's Landing. Daenerys convened a council in her throne hall to discuss the development. Tyrion, Missandei, Grey Worm, Ser Jorah, and various local leaders attended, along with a few representatives of the native tribes. The air was charged with tension. "We should not underestimate the faith militant," Tyrion cautioned, leaning on his cane. "History shows they can rouse the small folk into frenzies. If they gain the ear of the crown, or worse, if they usurp the crown's moral authority, we could see an inquisition of sorts. They might begin seizing our merchants or attacking them on Westerosi soil." A tribal elder with a necklace of carved bones frowned, though her expression was more puzzled than alarmed. "These faith militant, they claim to speak for their gods?" Missandei nodded. "Yes, in a way. They interpret the teachings of the Seven. Over the centuries, they have at times been peaceful, at times dangerously militant. They once forced a Targaryen king to disband them, but apparently they've arisen again." The elder shook her head. "We worship the spirits of the land and the sky. To say that dragons are demons is strange to us." Daenerys tapped the arm of her obsidian throne. "It is not strange in Westeros. They have feared dragons since Aegon's conquest. But do not let their ignorance become an excuse for them to sow bloodshed here. We must ensure that this does not escalate. I want to avoid a religious war at all costs." "How?" asked Ser Jorah simply, brow furrowed. "Fanatics rarely listen to reason. And if the High Septon condemns any alliance with you as heresy, it may force the lords who signed our treaty to choose between loyalty to the faith or loyalty to us." Tyrion sighed. "Some might still honor the treaty, but many will crumble under the weight of religious fervor. Especially if the new king, whoever truly holds power, gives in to the faith militants' demands." Grey Worm lifted his chin. "If they turn on us, we have dragons. We have armies. We can stand against them." Daenerys held up a hand. "We did not build New Valyria just to wage more wars. I will not sail west to burn septs or slaughter the faithful. That would only prove their worst fears about us. But I also will not abandon the right to defend our people and our trade. We must seek a path that keeps conflict at bay." Her gaze swept the room. "Missandei, can we send word to the moderate voices in Westeros? I know not all devout believers follow the High Septon blindly." Missandei nodded. "Yes, your grace. I can compile a list of septons and maesters known to be more tolerant. We can send letters urging dialogue, but we do not know how entrenched the faith militants' power has become. It might be that even moderate voices fear retribution." Daenerys' mouth set in a grim line. "We must try. Tyrion, coordinate with Missandei. Draft letters that clarify our intentions. Make it clear we do not seek to attack anyone's faith. We only demand the freedom to exist." Tyrion bowed. "As you command." Ser Jorah spoke up, his voice gentle. "And what of House Glover, House Velaryon, and the others who have signed the treaty? They will be prime targets for the faith militants' wrath." "Yes," Daenerys acknowledged. "Send them word as well, remind them that we will uphold our end of the bargain. If they face reprisals, we can offer refuge to those lords and their families. Perhaps the faith militant will hesitate to instigate a direct confrontation, knowing there is a place of sanctuary across the sea." The council broke apart, each member tasked with preserving peace. Over the next weeks, letters sailed across the waves. Some arrived unanswered, others returned with cautious pledges of continued goodwill. House Glover, true to its word, seemed intent on honoring the agreement. Lord Galbart wrote to say that the North was largely unconcerned with the High Septon's edicts. Faith fervor was less potent among Northerners who still looked to their weirwoods and old gods. House Velaryon, on the other hand, found itself under heavy pressure at court in King's Landing, especially from powerful families that aligned with the faith. Ser Eustace's letters warned of menacing crowds outside the Velaryon estate, chanting slogans against dragon spawn. As tensions mounted, Daenerys took a stand. She ordered that any Westerosi lord or retainer threatened by the faith militants' wrath could find asylum in New Valyria, provided they came peacefully and did not bring open conflict. Several families, mostly minor nobility or merchants with ties to the new trade routes, quietly took her up on the offer. They arrived in small ships, some in the dead of night, seeking a new home away from zealots. It reminded Daenerys of the refugees she had once encountered in Essos, fleeing the masters and seeking sanctuary under her banner, a cycle repeating in a new form. In the midst of this crisis, fresh challenges arose closer to home. Reports filtered in of a sickness spreading through a nearby tribal region, an ailment causing high fevers and rash. Concerned for her neighbors, Daenerys dispatched healers and supplies, mindful that disease ignored political lines. She also traveled there herself, taking Drogon part of the way, then riding a horse through dense forest to reach the affected villages. She carried herbs from Essos, potions from local shamans, and knowledge gleaned from the maesters who had joined her cause. For days, she worked alongside her people, tending to the ill, distributing clean water, and comforting families. Her dragons flew overhead, occasionally landing to rest, and at first their looming presence frightened some villagers. But Daenerys assured them the beasts meant no harm, that they had come to help. The sight of the queen tending the sick left a powerful impression. Word spread throughout New Valyria of how Daenerys soothed dying children, risking infection herself. She held trembling hands, prayed in hushes, and even used small amounts of dragon fire in a controlled manner to sterilize the wooden huts afflicted with the contagion. By the end of her visit, the outbreak had abated, and the tribe exp. Rest gratitude with symbolic carvings gifted to her. For Daenerys, the experience crystallized her belief in what true leadership meant, serving rather than ruling with terror. Upon returning to the capital, exhausted but relieved, Daenerys found Tyrion waiting with urgent news. "Your Grace, it seems the Faith Militant has seized several merchant ships bearing our banner off the coast near Dorne. They've taken the crews prisoner, claiming they were trafficking in unholy goods." A flare of anger ignited in her chest. "Did they harm them?" "Uncertain. The rumor is they're holding them in a makeshift camp. The local Dornish prince might intervene, but his relationship with the Faith is fragile." Daenerys set her jaw. "Then we must do something. Peace is one thing, but letting them attack our ships is another. If they think they can do this without consequence, they'll only grow bolder." Tyrion nodded. "Indeed. But how far do we push back? A direct assault on Dorne would be a declaration of war, exactly what we want to avoid." She paced across the marble floor of her private chamber. "We can't simply sit idle. Perhaps a demonstration of force, but not an invasion. If we send a few war galleys escorted by one of my dragons to demand the release of our people, that might be enough. We'll remain outside their port, making it clear we only want our citizens returned. If they refuse to listen, we'll blockade that harbor until they do." Tyrion exhaled, tension evident in his stance. "It's a gamble, Your Grace. But it might work, provided we don't overstep. Choose a trustworthy commander for the mission. Not hot-headed, but resolute. Grey Worm, perhaps." Tyrion dipped his head. "He'd be the ideal choice. I'll speak with him at once." Soon, a small fleet set sail under Grey Worm's command, accompanied by Rhaegal, who flew overhead under Daenerys' urging. Drogon remained behind. She did not wish to appear overly aggressive. The mission was clear: sail near the Dornish coast, communicate with local authorities, and secure the release of the captured sailors through peaceful negotiation if possible. Meanwhile, Daenerys and Tyrion penned urgent letters to the Dornish prince, reminding him of the benefits of continued trade and the grave risk of condoning the Faith Militant's overreach. Days stretched into weeks, tension gripping New Valyria as they awaited word. At last, a raven arrived, bearing a message sealed with Grey Worm's sigil. He reported moderate success. The Dornish had no desire to face a blockade or anger the queen with the dragons at her disposal. The Faith Militant capitulated, releasing the imprisoned crews. Hostilities averted for now. Yet the letter also contained a warning: the Faith had grown entrenched in some ports, and their leader, calling himself the Sword of the Seven, vowed to cleanse the world of dragon abominations. Grey Worm cautioned that open confrontations might become more frequent if tensions remained high. Daenerys read the words by lanternlight. A heaviness pressed on her, for she sensed an escalation was inevitable. Once again, her lineage faced a brand of hatred fueled by fear and zealotry. She could not help but recall the prophecy in Old Valyria, the one that had offered her a fork in the road: remain and burn, or depart and find another destiny. She had departed, yes, but the fires of the old world still threatened to consume all that she had built if she could not contain them. She closed her eyes, reminding herself of the faces she had seen in the villages, the children she had saved, the farmers whose livelihood she protected. Those were the reasons she could not waver. Over subsequent months, skirmishes at sea flared sporadically. The Faith Militant harassed ships, especially those bearing the sigils of houses loyal to Daenerys' new alliance. In response, patrols from New Valyria grew more frequent, culminating in a handful of brief naval battles. Casualties occurred on both sides, stoking resentment. Yet Daenerys remained resolute in her decision not to launch a full invasion of Westeros. The cost in lives and the moral implications would be too great, risking the very downfall she had once foreseen. Instead, she pursued a multi-pronged strategy. She intensified diplomacy, dispatching Missandei to treat with various lords who might oppose the faith's extremism. She expanded the settlement's navy to protect their merchant routes more effectively. And she strengthened her realm's internal unity, building roads to ensure that if outsiders tried to sow discord among the tribal communities, they would not succeed. Some days it felt like a delicate dance on a razor's edge, with one misstep leading to a bloodbath. In a stroke of fortune, a new wave of Westerosi refugees arrived, including a Septon who had once held some stature within the faith. Disillusioned by the militant turn in King's Landing, he offered a unique perspective on how the High Septon manipulated scripture to whip the masses into fervor. Daenerys granted him sanctuary, providing him a platform to preach a more moderate, inclusive doctrine that recognized dragons not as demons but as divine creatures shaped by the gods. This sparked debate within the city's small Westerosi community, but it also showed that the faith's condemnations were not unanimous. A glimmer of hope that the tide of fanaticism could be slowed by voices from within. In the midst of these troubles, life in New Valyria persisted, fields yielded bountiful harvests, the academy thrived, new art and architecture sprang up. Daenerys took solace in her people's resilience and creativity. She often visited the roosts of her dragons in the mountains, finding calm in their presence. Sometimes she even glimpsed a synergy between the dragons and the land. Scorched clearings turned fertile faster, as if the volcanic soil and dragon fire combined to rejuvenate the earth. A curious miracle of the new domain. Eventually, an emissary arrived from King's Landing itself, bearing the seal of the crown. He was a young noble, flanked by two knights wearing the royal crest, a stag combined with the lion of House Lannister, the rumored personal sigil of the new king. The moment he stepped into Daenerys' throne hall, tension crackled. Tyrion recognized one of the knights as distantly related to House Lannister, though he was uncertain of the exact branch. The emissary presented a scroll. Daenerys, storeborn of House Targaryen, he said, voice quavering slightly under the high ceiling. I come to deliver the words of King Ormond Baratheon Lannister, first of his name, protector of the realm. Daenerys' face remained composed. Speak. He unrolled the parchment. Henceforth, any vessel bearing the mark of the so-called New Valyria is banned from ports loyal to the Iron Throne. The crown cannot condone trade with a power that harbors those who defy the Seven. Dragons, being monstrous abominations, are forbidden from flying near Westerosi shores. Any violation of this edict shall be met with the full might of the king's justice. A hush fell. Daenerys felt heat rise in her veins, recalling all the times she had tried to keep the door to peaceful relations open. This decree effectively cut off her alliance from half of Westeros, and it was an overt threat to punish her people for merely existing. She rose, voice clear. We have not attacked King's Landing nor threatened the throne. We have only protected our ships from unprovoked aggression and offered refuge to those persecuted by zealots. And for this, your king declares all-out hostility. The emissary swallowed. The king sees no difference between the faith militants' actions and your own. He claims your presence on the seas provokes these conflicts. He demands that you cease all alliances with houses that owe fealty to the Iron Throne and that you withdraw your dragons from the narrow sea, never to threaten Westerosi skies again. Grey Worm and Ser Jorah bristled at the insolence. Tyrion's face darkened. In a measured tone, Daenerys responded, tell your king that we reject this decree. New Valyria is sovereign, and we will not abandon our allies nor our ships. If the faith militant continues to attack, we will defend ourselves. We do not seek war, but we will not be cowed by threats from a man who wields a stolen throne. The emissary's jaw clenched. I am only a messenger, your grace. I must also inform you that the High Septon has demanded you present yourself in King's Landing for a trial of heresy within a moon's turn. Failure to comply will be taken as admission of guilt. Daenerys nearly laughed at the absurdity. A trial of heresy? By whose authority? The High Septon speaks for a portion of Westeros, not for the world. We do not kneel to the Seven here, nor do we accept the authority of that throne. Her eyes flicked to the knights behind him. They shifted uneasily. You have delivered your message. Return now and deliver mine in turn. We will not yield. We will not be judged by false prophets. The emissary gathered his courage enough to incline his head stiffly. Then I fear the consequences are set in motion. May the Seven have mercy on us all. With that, he spun on his heel and left, the knights trailing behind. A heavy silence hung in the hall. Daenerys turned to her council. Tyrion's knuckles were white on his cane. "So the lines are drawn," he said. "They mean to pressure us into isolation, to brand you a heretic so that any lord who deals with us is an accomplice." Grey Worm spat in anger. "They talk of justice, but they only want power." Daenerys approached the mosaic behind her throne, fingers grazing the stones. "I foresaw something like this. Old hatreds, old fears. It's the same story with new faces. But we will stand firm. We built this realm on the idea that no one should live in terror. I will not let them terrify us." She ordered a new set of ravens and hawks to carry messages, proclaiming that New Valyria remained open for trade and refuge. She assured her allies that she would not abandon them despite the king's threats. At the same time, she stepped up fortifications around her coasts. The old notion of building a wall to keep out enemies returned to her mind, but she dismissed it. Instead, she relied on strategic watchtowers, a vigilant navy, and the swift presence of dragons to deter any large-scale invasion. She doubted the king could muster enough ships to cross the sea and mount a credible threat. Still, a sense of foreboding coiled in her gut. Weeks turned into months. The tension ratcheted higher as more Westerosi houses were forced to declare loyalty to the king's edict or risk excommunication by the faith. Some tried to straddle the line, paying lip service to the crown while still trading covertly with New Valyria. Others cut ties outright, fearing the wrath of the faith militant. Daenerys felt the pinch economically. Fewer ships came from Westeros. Yet trade with Essos and the Jade Sea still flowed, and her realm remained self-sufficient in most resources. Then, in the thick of the hot season, came a shocking development. A small fleet of Westerosi ships approached New Valyria's harbor under a flag of truce. This time, the banner carried was neither Glover's fist nor Valerion's seahorse, but the direwolf of House Stark. Daenerys felt her heart stir at the sight of that banner, remembering Jon Snow, the man who had once been her ally, friend, and, for a brief moment, more. She met the newcomers at the docks in person, flanked by Grey Worm and Ser Jorah. Leading the party was a middle-aged woman in riding leathers, her hair braided in a pragmatic style, gray flecking at her temples. She knelt before Daenerys, rising to meet her gaze. "Your Grace," she said, voice firm with underlying respect. "I am Lyanna Stark, daughter of—" Daenerys's breath caught. "Daughter of Jon Snow?" Lyanna nodded. "Yes, though his official name was Aegon Targaryen once. But he rarely used that name in the north. He never forgot what you did for the realm or what you meant to him even after your departure. I come now because the north can no longer abide what the faith militant and this so-called king are doing to the Seven Kingdoms. My father is gone, he died 2 winters past, but his teachings live on in me." A storm of emotion raged within Daenerys. She recalled her last sight of Jon, the pain of their parting, the sense of betrayal and heartbreak. She had left partly because of the prophecy's dire warnings, partly because she feared she could not control her own anger in a land that seemed poised to despise her. But hearing that he had never forgotten her lit a spark of warmth within her chest. She masked it behind a regal composure. "Lyanna Stark, your father was a good man. I regret many things about the events that separated us. But tell me, why have you come?" The woman's eyes gleamed with a fierce intelligence. "Because the North remembers. We remember that you fought alongside us against the dead, that you lost a dragon and men in that fight. We remember that you were prepared to help unite the realm before fate intervened. And we will not stand by while a puppet king and a corrupt faith incite hatred against you, or against anyone who deals fairly with you. Winterfell's lords are prepared to break from the Iron Throne once again if it comes to that." Daenerys sensed the significance of this moment. If House Stark truly meant to defy the throne, it could fracture the Seven Kingdoms anew. That is a grave step. The cost could be steep. Lyanna Stark exhaled. "We are not eager to draw swords, Your Grace, but we will not bow to these bigots. The faith militant threatens our ways as well. The North has never been devout to the Seven, and their infiltration in our lands has already led to unrest." Daenerys studied Lyanna's posture. Steady, unafraid, reminiscent of Jon's quiet strength. "What would you have me do?" "Nothing rash," Lyanna said. "But I wanted to speak with you personally, away from the ears of the throne, to confirm that if the North stands against the faith militant and the king, you will not abandon us. We do not ask you to invade on our behalf, only that you maintain open trade and possibly share naval intelligence if the crown tries to isolate or attack us. We stand as allies, not as subjects. Daenerys nodded, hearing an echo of her own convictions in those words. I do not seek to rule the North. I only wish to keep my people safe from unwarranted aggression. If you truly stand against the tyranny of the faith militant, then we are kindred in purpose. Lyanna placed a hand over her heart. Then I bring you the North's gratitude, and I hope this is the beginning of a renewed friendship. A small crowd gathered, murmuring at the presence of a Stark in New Valyria. Daenerys offered her hand to Lyanna in a gesture of respect. The younger woman took it, sealing an unspoken pact. In that moment, Daenerys felt the sweep of destiny stirring, as though the ghosts of her past lingered near, watching. She thought of Jon Snow once again, how their stories had woven together in conflict and fragile hope, only to be severed. Now his daughter stood before her, carrying forward the legacy of unity they had once tried to build. She led Lyanna and her party into the city, determined to learn more of the North's plight and to share the wonders of the realm she had built. Over the following days, they exchanged stories. Lyanna described how the crown's increasing taxation and the faith's zealotry had caused riots in southern towns. She spoke of lords in the Reach who quietly abhorred the faith's tyranny but feared open defiance. Meanwhile, Daenerys showed her the fields where freedmen and tribespeople worked side by side, the roosts where dragons soared unchained, and the academies where children learned each other's tongues. Lyanna marveled at this harmonious blend, admitting that the North was far more rigid in its customs. One night, by a campfire near the roosting cliffs, Lyanna gathered her courage to speak of her father's final days. Daenerys listened with a lump in her throat, hearing how Jon had struggled to maintain peace in a kingdom battered by constant strife, how he had often gazed eastward, lost in thought. In his later years, he had even told Lyanna stories of Daenerys, of her strength, her dragons, and her unwavering resolve to break chains. Though he had never again seen the woman he loved, he had continued to believe in her better nature. Daenerys felt tears burn her eyes, though she remained composed. In her heart, she whispered a silent farewell to Jon, a final closure she had never realized she needed. By the time Lyanna's visit ended, a new understanding had formed. The North would not directly declare open war on the crown yet, but it stood ready to break away if the faith militants' aggression continued. New Valyria would maintain trade with them, offering safe harbors and shared intelligence. It was an alliance reminiscent of the one Daenerys had forged with the Northern Lords in the past, but this time built on deeper mutual respect and the memory of a bond once forged on the frozen fields beyond the Wall. So the tapestry of alliances shifted again, not through conquest but through quiet solidarity. As Lyanna Stark and her retinue prepared to depart, Daenerys met them at the docks. She clasped Lyanna's hand in farewell. Convey my respects to your people, and tell them that if they ever need a safe haven, New Valyria's gates stand open. Lyanna nodded. You have my word. And if the king or the faith seeks to harm you, the North shall not be silent. They parted under a slate-gray sky, the sea churned by an oncoming storm. Daenerys lingered on the pier, the wind tugging at her hair as the Stark banner faded into the distance. She felt at once hopeful and wary. The world was shifting, and once again she walked a narrow path between peace and war. Yet in that uncertainty, she found purpose, an echo of the prophecy's caution. She had chosen to leave Westeros rather than burn it. Now the realm turned its gaze upon her once more, the flames of conflict flickering at the edges. But she had built a new destiny here, one that did not hinge on a single throne or a single crown. She was a queen who had learned to rule with heart as well as with fire. Standing by the water, she called out wordlessly, and Drogon answered from the skies, a dark shape passing overhead. He landed with a crash of talons on the rocky shore, snorting plumes of smoke. Daenerys placed a palm on his muzzle, feeling the rumble of his breath. We've come so far, she whispered, half to herself, half to the creature who had been with her through it all. We won't let them drag us back into madness. We will forge our path. And so she turned away from the sea, returning to her city, a place shaped by hope and compromise, shadowed by the specter of war but bolstered by the resilience of people who had chosen a different way. The air tasted of rain, the wind whipping salt against her face. In her veins, the blood of the dragon flowed, but it did not burn uncontrollably. Not anymore. She would fight if she must, fiercely, without remorse, to protect the innocent lives under her care. Yet she would not seek to conquer. Her realm was a testament to life beyond the wheel of endless conflict. If the faith militant or any other threatened all she cherished, she would stand tall, and dragons would soar once more to remind the world that Daenerys Stormborn had risen from the ashes of old Valyria to choose mercy over wrath. For now, that was enough. The future stretched out in many directions, uncertain like the sea under storm clouds. But she had forged a new Corso. NCE already, and she would do it again if she must. She was Daenerys Targaryen, breaker of chains, mother of dragons, and she had learned that destiny could be guided by will, shaped by choice. Even prophecies could be undone when the heart dared to hope. And so she walked on, deeper into New Valyria, where life pulsed with promise in every heartbeat, prepared to face whatever storms rose against her with a steadfast belief that this time, the dragon's fire would light the way, not engulf the world in flame.